tonight, the trial so many have been talking about, with details you haven't heard until now.
It was just greed after that.
What is this weird nightmare
that's visited upon this couple? She's sick and now he's dying. For him to just go from being fine to suddenly comatose.
What happened? What happened?
They were a great couple. They loved each other. They always wanted to be together.
Two people with no background in federal contracting. Suddenly they're going to be arms dealers for the federal government.
They were trusted in the community. A lot of the investors were family and close friends.
Had Michael expressed any doubts about the business?
The Cochran business model seemed to be built on defrauding their friends and family.
The investigators look at you and say, there were never any contracts, there were never any bids, it doesn't exist.
When people found out, they want answers.
I mean, it was all anyone could talk about.
Your friend, 38 years old, is gone.
Behind all the raw beauty in the untamed West Virginia mountainside are deep-rooted secrets, lies, and betrayal, and a small, close-knit community is upended.
I was just calling to see if you knew when everything surrounding the investigation is going to be over.
I don't understand what you mean by the investigation.
They're asking people very personal questions about me and my husband's relationship. But I just can't keep living this way.
And at the center of all that unraveling is this couple, the Cochrans.
It was on a Tuesday night on December the 23rd, 1980, 10:36 p.m. Michael Brandon Cochran was born into the world.
Tell me about Michael as a boy.
He was a good kid. He always minded me. You know, Eddie came into his life when he was 8 years old.
When I met Michael, he had like a rat tail haircut and with the spiked hair. We just kind of developed a good, warm relationship.
What about sports, though? And he was really into sports.
Oh, yeah. He was playing like the pee-wee baseball. You could just tell right then. He just took to it and was just like a natural.
And Michael Brandon was always playing baseball, basketball, football. He lifted weights as a hobby. He had a weight bench in his room. He got his first Sandfield barbell set around 10 or 11 years old. And he would just go in there and turn his music up loud and just start working out. He just loved being healthy. Of course, he loved the muscles. He loved the way it made him feel. In high school, they started having like powerlifting competitions. And Michael, he got first place. We were really proud of him.
At age 17, Michael meets a girl named Natalie Jessup, also 17, during a trip to the mall. It will change his life forever.
We had to go out to the sporting goods place one day, and there she was working behind the counter. And she was flirting with him really bad, you could tell that. And then the next thing I know, they were dating.
She seemed to be a relatively driven student in school. She was passionate about what she did. She loved her family.
After high school, both Michael and Natalie head off to West Virginia University, where he studies computers and she studies to be a pharmacist. The two freshmen had just started their first semester at WVU when Michael's mom, Donna, gets a call from Natalie.
They got engaged in November of 1999. And when Michael got on the phone, I just said, Michael Brandon, what in the world are you doing?
Were you happy for him to be marrying Natalie?
I wanted them to wait. He had just graduated high school like maybe 5 months before. And I wanted him to just, focus on his schooling. And then 6 months later, they were married.
The couple are the picture of happiness in their wedding photo. After graduation, they later have 2 children. And after 6 years of marriage, they settled in Daniels, West Virginia, here in this colonial home.
It's a beautiful home on almost 4 acres of flat land. Michael renovated that house. He just completely gutted it and remodeled it from top to bottom.
As the years went on, did they have a happy marriage?
As far as I know, they had a happy marriage.
Yeah, they're starting their life now, been starting their family. They've got good jobs.
Natalie was working as a pharmacist, and Michael was in IT.
Yes, information technology. Yeah, it was like running cable wire, coaxial cable, and things like that.
Life in West Virginia can kind of be summed up as like, here people really focus on work, family, and their faith.
How was Michael as a dad? He was a proud dad. He doted on his kids and was a good provider, was involved with them, the school activities and stuff.
The couple gets involved in their community.
He was a football coach and he was a baseball coach.
And wherever Michael was, you'd find Natalie working the sidelines.
She was a sports socialite. When Michael was the coach, she was the one you got all the information from. She was the one that ordered the uniforms and got your sizes.
He loved sports, and that was probably our biggest connection. Our family would see their family at games, and that's really how it got started, is just loving sports and hanging out.
Are there stories that you remember that when you really do think back to you all as couples, it kind of warms your heart that you remember?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Mike and I, we won a lot of championships together, coaching our kids.
Chris and Jennifer Davis bonded with the Cochrans over Little League, their young families, and church. They even went on vacations together. Chris, a lawyer, was hired by Michael for a legal matter, and the two became friends. What was it that made them sort of fit into your world?
It was really the family aspect. They were a great couple. They loved each other. They always wanted to be together. We gravitate toward friends who are always together and love their spouses, because we're always together.
So you were really close.
Yes, we were very close.
So at some point then you discover that one of your sons has diabetes.
Initially it's very grim, because it's, hey, this is what this is. It's never going to change, and this is what it's going to require.
Coincidentally, Natalie happened to specialize in diabetes management.
How helpful was that for you in the beginning?
Tremendous.
Tremendous.
She was amazing. Like, she just gave us all the information we needed, because you learn as you go.
So she understood how insulin could affect the body.
1,000%.
Then, seemingly out of the blue, the Cochrans make a career change and open a new business.
So they seem to be doing well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They're doing very well.
I invested and I spent $256,000.
And this new venture will lead them straight to the CIA.
Everybody is very involved with their kids around here, into sports, and that's where parents usually hang out, at school sporting events.
Just like his dad, Michael Cochran's son loves sports, especially baseball. And it's a family affair. With Michael coaching local youth sports leagues, Natalie becomes treasurer of the middle school baseball program.
She was heavily involved in that because Mike was a coach. They were involved in tons of leagues and different things.
So you were all involved as friends in the sports world with your children?
Yes, that's correct.
We met the Cochrans because I had put my son into the draft for the Little League Baseball.
Toni McCall met Michael and Natalie after her husband died of leukemia, leaving her a single mom to 3 children.
Michael very much took on a father figure role, especially for Cash. He was so good to him. He took him everywhere. They went fishing. They went to practices. It was a dream come true to have that father figure when you don't have one for your kids and you want one.
The Cochrans are a busy couple, both on and off the field. They open a business that is supposed to provide supplies to the federal government. It's called Tactical Solutions Group, or TSG. And they soon begin looking for big investors to help them pay the upfront money that is sometimes needed for government contracts. And to everybody's surprise, Natalie up and quits her job as a pharmacist, jumping into the new business completely.
Great. You know, I mean, if you can quit your job as a pharmacist, like, oh, wow.
By all accounts, the new business appears to be flourishing.
They were building onto their house, and they put up a new fence. Mike got a car.
So they seem to be doing well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. They're doing very well.
Natalie tells friends they were inspired by that movie War Dogs, the one about two men with no experience in the defense industry who become arms dealers to the U.S. military and get in way over their heads.
They call guys like us war dogs, bottom feeders who make money off of war without ever stepping foot on the battlefield.
When she told me that we're going to make all of our employees watch War Dogs as like an onboarding video, I said, well, you do realize that the guys went to jail, right?
It might surprise people to know that any civilian can seek a government contract. All you have to do is register, and then you can start bidding. It can be a small business, an individual, a nonprofit agreeing to provide goods or services to the government at a specific rate at an agreed upon time.
The process is you discover the contract, you bid on the contract.
And if you're chosen, suddenly you're in business with the U.S. government.
The Cochran's website for their business, TSG, boasts impressive clientele from within the government, including the Department of Defense, FEMA, Homeland Security, and the CIA.
Tactical Solutions Group was supposed to be a whole goods seller, so they could sell healthcare equipment, masks, firearms, and various things like that.
Michael Cochran would spend hours sifting through all of these government contracts, and he would tell Natalie what he'd found. She'd go to the investors and say, Michael found the most incredible investment.
What did you know about what this business was all about?
They got this niche, a woman-owned small business. The idea of the federal government will pay $50 for a $10 hammer. You just got to be able to get in there and get the contracts and fight with the big guys.
And all the couple needs now is a little startup cash.
Most of their investors were friends, family, people that they knew.
We invested $245,360.69. That was our retirement savings.
Michael's mom, Donna, remembers the first time Natalie approached her about investing in the family business.
Do you remember what she said?
Yeah, she asked us if we wanted to do the government contract. She said that she wanted to help us out, you know, when we got ready to retire.
At what point did you decide that maybe this was something you might be interested in getting involved in?
About a month later, she told me that she was doing it for her parents, that they'd made $60,000 in 5 months. And so we thought, well, you know, maybe we'll give it a try.
That's a pretty good return.
Yes, ma'am, it sure is.
Donna Bolt says her daughter-in-law claimed she could get her initial investment back with profit, sometimes in as little as 10 days.
So when they come to you for a potential investment, what's your initial thought?
Well, my initial thought was, sure.
The Cochran's close friends, Chris and Jennifer Davis, say the couple approached them after church saying they needed some major cash to fulfill a contract for dental labs, saying if they didn't get the money right away, they'd lose the entire contract.
But it was more than just, hey, do you want to invest? There were supposed to be dental facilities on military bases. That's why we couldn't see any of the documents. Because she knew I was going to ask that. I was like, well, what's the con? You know, well, you can't see it. You don't have authorization. We can't do that because it's Department of Defense. And so we were like, sure, yeah, man, we'll help out.
How much were you investing?
$511,000.
When Chris Davis hears who's investing, he says it seems like a safe opportunity.
I trusted all those names and people in the community.
So if they were involved, it must be sound and good.
Absolutely. The names that were lining up, it fit, like, okay, these people aren't going to do anything crazy.
Tony McCall says the circle of trust was how she too decides to invest.
She had pulled someone in that I was close to and had been getting them to do contracts.
She says that person calls one day with an opportunity for the two of them to go in on a contract, but they've got to do it immediately.
It pays out in 45 days, but you have to do it right now. Like eBay, she bids at the very last minute so that nobody can go in and bid over top of her. But you have to tell me right now. And so I did it. I spent $256,000.
By all accounts, it seemed to be a safe bet. The Cochrans appear to be doing well.
I had seen the money that they were spending.
They had multiple vehicles, they had motorcycles, they were buying trips overseas.
The Cochrans are living the high life, but then suddenly the youth sports league is broke.
This ain't good. I really felt in my heart that something was going on.
You don't have anything, it's all spent.
Could something be afoul at the Little League? In the small community of Beckley, West Virginia, after just a year, Natalie and Michael Cochran's business is doing very well. And family and friends noticed the couple seemed to be too.
It appeared that Natalie and Michael were quite wealthy, and they were living like they were.
They had multiple vehicles, they had motorcycles, they were buying trips overseas to Paris, they went to Hawaii.
You know, we just thought it was wonderful. We just thought they were doing so good that we were so proud of them.
I mean, they had 3 homes, a pickup truck, motorcycles, a nice antique car.
Him and Natalie drove up in a 1965 Shelby Cobra. It was a kit car. It was just something that they bought, and we were just very happy. We even took a ride in it.
They were living much higher than the majority of people in Beckley, West Virginia.
Did you see a difference in how their lives seem to be changing?
Oh, yeah.
You were on vacation together. What kind of vacations did you take?
We did beach vacations, and then we went to New York City a couple of times with them.
Yeah.
And so the typical sightseeing, shopping.
Everybody got along?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
it was fun.
It was great.
It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
From the outside, it appeared that a lot of the spending was on Michael's side.
This was wealth that he had not experienced before, so he wanted to take advantage of it. Some of the things that Michael Cochran purchased in this period were recreational vehicles, an airplane hangar. He had ambitions and endeavors to open up an aviation branch to this business.
He really, really wanted to fly, and he loved that type of stuff. He was working on his pilot's license. Now, he wanted to fly helicopters.
They were a great couple to get that kind of money. They were doing things for people, and I mean good things.
Michael especially was doing a lot of charity work. He donated a weight room to a local middle school. When he found out his youth pastor was going to be homeless for a while, he actually purchased a property for him to live in.
Natalie even gets involved with local organizations and charities.
She volunteered, wanted to do this and wanted to do that.
She was helping us with juvenile diabetes research, all the fundraisers for that. And then we did a 5K run. She was good at that. She would organize it, get sponsors, get the word out.
One time she and Mike were at the house, and she told me that they were going to buy a town in Africa because that was going to be their mission, you know, pay for everyone's home and build homes.
Natalie also helps raise money for the Middle School Baseball League. Their friend Chris is board president.
We had a fundraiser, and from the fundraiser, we believe we raised a little over $15,000. It was a big deal.
As treasurer of the Little League, Natalie manages the bank account, but members get suspicious when the money all but disappears.
But you knew there was a big chunk of money in there.
Yes, there should have been over $20,000 in there, absolutely.
Any idea of how it was drained like that?
Nobody knew it was missing until we were told it's missing.
The league brings in a private investigator to look into where the money's gone.
And I talked to the board and I explained to them, you don't have anything but $31 in a frozen bank account. There's no records of anything as to where this money went. It's all spent.
There was an audit that was done. There were purchases made that weren't approved by the league.
There was purchases to TJ Maxx, purchases to Olive Garden, and then when I started adding it up, I'm like, $32,000 in one night you raise for 2 sports teams, and it all just disappears. I mean, there's no way to rectify that.
Questions are now swirling over the missing money and if Natalie could be involved. And when some investors with the Cochran's business get wind of it, they're getting concerned about the money they've been promised.
As time is going on and you're not hearing anything, are you starting to panic at all?
We'd ask. We'd say, Natalie, we need our money. I said, our car's gonna break down. We need the money back. She would say, it's coming, I promise. And then she would send me text messages and say, your money is going to be deposited in your bank account within the next 24 hours. And we'd wait, and it was never there.
You didn't get anything?
No.
Donna says that any communication she had about the couple's business was typically with Natalie, not her son.
Every time that I received any kind of a message, it was a text message from Natalie. It was she and I that was constantly going back and forth with contracts.
Meantime, Natalie continues to portray the business as extremely successful.
From the outside looking in, I would have probably been like pretty impressed. Thought, man, right here in Raleigh County, West Virginia, these people are knocking it out of the park.
One investor says it's astonishing how much money Natalie says she's pulling in.
She did give me a number at the time. This was like $343 million we're going to have to put in this bank. That was a little hard to believe.
Natalie and Michael tell a local bank their business is worth more than $500 million when they apply for a $100,000 loan.
Was her business worth $500 million? No, absolutely not.
It turns out the Cochran's business is not what it appears to be.
I said, in pure West Virginian, this ain't good. I really felt in my heart something was going on.
The fundamental problem is that it was all a lie.
And when secrets come to light, it's far worse than anyone could have imagined.
There is nothing wrong with doing well and having a successful business.
Well, the Cochrans and their business, Tactical Solutions Group, put themselves out to be legitimate government contractors who were bidding on legitimate government contracts.
She always made all of them look like they were good investments.
The problem is there never was any legitimate income flowing from government contracts. All the money and cash flow is coming from investors.
There were no contracts. There were never any contracts. There were never any bids. It doesn't exist.
The businesses didn't exist at all, really, legitimately.
They existed on paper.
It was clear that it was a Ponzi scheme.
When it comes to a Ponzi scheme, there's no real business. There's no money being generated. Early investors get paid by new investor money, like shifting poker chips from one pile to another. And as long as the money's coming in from new investors, the Ponzi scheme can continue.
If you're just taking one investor's money and giving it to another investor as if it's a legitimate return on their investment, that's a fraud.
I said, no, these are friends of mine. I've seen what they've done in the community.
Successful Ponzi schemes almost always rely on trust, and you often find that people start very close to home.
The Cochran business model seemed to be built on defrauding their friends and family. Many of them knew them their entire lives, and they had no reason to not trust them.
It would hurt a lot less for this to have been someone that I didn't know that had scammed me out of money. It would hurt a lot less. I was already wounded from my husband passing away, and my kids the same.
These were friends, neighbors, and family members who were defrauded, and the question is whether Michael knew about it.
Michael was not the brains of the couple. He was a great guy, but Natalie was the brains of the operation. And Michael would look for contracts on the government website, and then he would give them to Natalie, and she would make the bid.
Had Michael expressed any concerns, any doubts about the business to you?
Not about the business. He was stressed about the government. He did not understand why the government will not give them their money, and he just couldn't figure it out. How can they do this?
But of course, the federal government didn't owe the Cochrans any money because they'd never conducted any business with them.
Michael Cochran was asking her questions very similar to the questions being asked by the investors who were trying to get their money back.
She was giving the same excuses to Michael that she was giving to the investors.
Natalie would tell me, we're being audited, there's a government shutdown. There was always some excuse with her.
The lives and paychecks of some 800,000 federal workers hanging in the balance.
Around Christmas time in 2018, there was a government shutdown, and it lasted until January 25th of the following year.
Day 32 of the government shutdown, now beginning its second month. We have never seen this.
Natalie used this whole government shutdown to her advantage. Her investors were coming and saying, we want our money. We'd like to pull it out. And she would say, well, I can't. The government is shut down. There's no way to get access to your money. They're not paying anybody.
She had a never-ending list of reasons that they were not seeing their returns.
When she could no longer blame the federal government for the delays, she turned to, I guess, more of the emotional side of, saying that she had cancer.
We're feeling bad for her. She even told us that she had cancer, that she wasn't going to do anything about it, that she was going to let God take care of it. And if he took her on, then that would be fine. And I just got so distraught and emotional, and I kept telling her she needed to fight, not to give up.
She said she was in stage 3. Her and Mike were talking about not going through chemo and radiation and just living what life she has left.
Was that devastating?
Oh, completely. Yeah.
We were all pretty devastated, to the point we all get the paperwork to go get our bone marrow tested to see if there was any way we could help her.
Remember, Toni McCall had lost her husband to leukemia. She was skeptical about Natalie's claim of having cancer.
I believe that Natalie used the leukemia to stall on having any payments. I knew she didn't have stage 3 leukemia because it's not in stages, it's in types. Everything pointed to the fact that she did not have it. She had told us that she was losing her hair from the chemo she was taking, and she flips her hair over and she has the perfect dime-sized circle where she has shaved a spot in her hair. And if you lose your hair from chemo, you don't see 5 o'clock shadow. What woman would shave a spot on their head to say, look, I'm losing my hair? And so I absolutely knew at that point that she would do anything to cover up and to lie.
Then early one morning, Michael and Natalie are set to take a private plane to Virginia for a scheduled bank meeting, but they never make that flight.
I just kept asking her, what happened? What happened?
On the morning of February 6th, the plan was that the Cochrans, Michael and Natalie, were going to fly to Virginia to visit the Bank of America there.
She had text messages going with me and Jennifer.
So the morning of February 6th, they were going to go take a flight.
She said she was too sick to fly. She had the flu and the norovirus, and it hit her so hard because of her cancer. She had gone to the doctor, and they put her on such a high dose of steroids that her blood sugar was elevated. She had asked to borrow a vial of insulin.
So she needed a bottle of your son's insulin?
Yes. And I told her that Chris was getting ready to leave the house, that he could drop it off for her.
Chris drops the insulin around 10:30 that morning. Jennifer and Chris receive a photo about 2 hours later, around 12:30, of Michael laying unconscious in the Cochran's kitchen floor.
Michael was laying in the fetal position in the floor in his kitchen.
So she sends a photo out of him on the floor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my reaction in the text was, is he okay? What's going on? He's fine. The contractors are here, putting him on the couch. Okay.
Michael is moved from the floor to the couch. People start coming into the home saying, hey, you should probably take him to the hospital.
Throughout the day, some of the couple's friends come to the house while others text Natalie, worried about Michael.
Every time we would check on him, we would get, he's fine.
He's going to sleep it
He's
off.
going to sleep, he's sleeping it off.
She said that he was sleeping it off on the couch.
The wording of the messages were as if she was communicating with him. He won't go to the hospital. Oh.
He won't go to the hospital?
Yes, when she says he won't go to the hospital, in my mind, I'm thinking that he's told her, I'm not going to go to the hospital.
Almost unilaterally, all of Natalie's friends were urging her to take Michael to the hospital, and Michael needed medical attention.
And so you're looking at close to 8 hours that this man, that he was incapacitated. He was unconscious, he was on the couch, and pretty much unresponsive.
I get a message at around 6:30. I'm at Gavin's basketball game. And the message says, can you come by after the game?
Chris Davis shows up and insists that they take Michael to the hospital, and they load Michael in the car.
I knew something was wrong. He's just totally unresponsive. I was like, well, I said, he's got to go to the hospital.
He's been unconscious for 7-8 hours. Like, we're getting him to the hospital.
Michael got to the ER at Raleigh General Hospital. His blood glucose was at 21. He was critical, and he was intubated.
A blood glucose level of 21 would be extremely low, dangerously low, and basically result likely in some sort of massive cognitive dysfunction, coma, seizure, or even death.
Michael's parents are at home that night with no idea of their son's condition.
We came home from church, watched a little TV. I was in the bed. Eddie brought me my phone. He said, you got a text message from Natalie. It's 10:30 at night.
Concerned by such a late night text, Michael's mom, Donna, checks Natalie's message.
She sent me a picture. There's Michael Brandon in the bed, and he's on the ventilator, unconscious, unresponsive.
The Davises also received texts from Natalie showing Michael in the hospital.
I just kept asking her on text message, what happened? What happened?
Doctors determined that Michael is suffering from cerebral edema.
Cerebral edema is the medical term for swelling in the brain. We usually think about cerebral edema in the setting of a big bleed or a traumatic event.
Michael Brandon, he was fighting to breathe. He was trying his best to live.
Michael spends at least 4.5 days in a hospital in Charleston.
She makes this decision, she's going to take him off the ventilator and everything.
What are you thinking at that point, Jennifer?
I think there's total shock. I just remember thinking, this isn't happening. This can't be real.
Yeah,
like,
this was
so tragic.
What is this weird nightmare that just, my goodness.
That's visited upon this couple.
Yeah.
She's sick and now he's dying.
Like, Those poor kids. My goodness, those poor, like, this is awful. It was awful.
For 5 days, he received medical treatment. He was in a coma, never regained consciousness, and passed away on February the 11th at the hospice house in Beckley.
Your friend, 38 years old, within days, is gone.
It was awful. It was tragic.
It's just sad, you know. We went to the funeral. It just all seems surreal. Everything's just kind of like you're like in this fog, you know. Just unimaginable.
After Mike had passed, Natalie called me one day and said that I've created this scholarship in his memory.
Natalie starts a scholarship called the Coach Michael Cochran Legacy Scholarship. It appeared that Natalie was selecting people who were family members. There were also people that Michael coached.
Tony McCall's son is one of those high school students that Natalie had offered a 4-year college scholarship to.
These scholarships, they're the kind that kids dream of.
Natalie, newly widowed, continues running her businesses. But then 4 months after her husband's death, she suddenly decides to sell nearly half of Tactical Solutions Group for $4 million.
She had negotiated to sell that business with a buyer, offering to buy a 49% interest of her business. So this buyer had wired her $50,000 as an earnest deposit on his buy-in to this business.
But before the deal can go through, police show up at the Cochran home with a search warrant.
She said, oh, they came here and they took everything.
When they raided her house that day in June, that was huge. I mean, it was all anyone could talk about.
When police search the Cochran home, they find something unexpected that could explain Michael's sudden death.
A man, 38 years old, what a fitness guru he was, to suddenly die in the midst of financial crimes occurring. I mean, that's pretty suspicious.
So they decide to exhume Michael Cochran's body. Does the big con turn into an even bigger crime?
At first, this was just a Ponzi scheme investigation.
Tonight, all eyes on the headline-making court case that just wrapped.
The interest in this case was huge.
Police are investigating the death of Michael Cochran.
To suddenly die in the midst of allegations of financial crimes, that's pretty suspicious.
So you think he was duped as well?
100% I believe that.
The defense counsel made it clear they were living this lavish lifestyle. So how couldn't he have known that this was a Ponzi scheme?
Natalie weaved such a web of lies, keeping us all drinking the Kool-Aid.
They open the fridge, they find the vial of insulin.
That was huge.
Did anybody take insulin in the house?
No. I said, insulin, what are you doing with the insulin in the refrigerator?
Prosecutors called that the murder weapon.
What keeps Gavin alive, she used to take life.
Just in shock. I'm still in shock.
The defense can say, maybe he died of something else.
I know that he took steroids and he took many other supplements.
He was a ticking bomb.
Your daughter-in-law is being accused of killing your son.
I mean, how do you kill somebody that you're supposed to love?
It's been 7 months since 38-year-old Michael Cochran's death, and Private Eye James Quisenberry sends an employee on an undercover mission to Michael's wife Natalie's garage.
I just seen the sign and figured I'd come out this way.
Oh.
She was selling a bunch of things and items at her house.
This is security camera cable, and then this is Ethernet cable.
He's there to secretly get a closer look.
The question was still out there of whether she was sitting on a pile of money, all these different questions.
You don't want to sell the rest of anything else?
Not really. I'm going to keep those for my son. My husband passed away, so my dad helped me go through it, and we kept things that my son might use when he grows up. So.
Okay.
Had there been something there that shouldn't have been there, would have turned it over to law enforcement. She's all smiles and looking at him and trying to be polite, and as soon as he turns his back, she changes her look, like her whole demeanor changes.
In the months since Michael Cochran's death, authorities have started to take a hard look at the Cochrans' so-called businesses.
I received a phone call from a trooper who had spoke with a local business person who had purchased some firearms from the Cochrans, and he had a problem with getting his firearms delivered or the money returned, and he was looking for help in resolving that matter. He had been solicited to be an investor in contracts. He never did it because the information he was receiving from Natalie Cochran on these investment solicitations didn't make sense to him.
I was like, yes, we definitely need to take a look at this.
So that disgruntled customer then connected investigators with someone who said he had invested with Natalie Cochran.
The problem that he was encountering was he kept getting excuse after excuse after excuse with getting his money returned.
Bob was going through the records as they were coming in, and so, you know, there's a ton of information there to go through. And Bob's looking at it, we're sitting there one day, and he goes, I'll be damned. He said, it's a damn Ponzi scheme.
As they dig in, they take notice of the investigation into that Little League account. Remember, board members had been suspicious of Natalie after money had gone missing.
The Shady Spring Little League bank account is one of the many accounts she used to facilitate her Ponzi scheme.
Natalie would deposit from their company and then sift it back out in various different ways.
Natalie called the alleged financial crimes bogus, and ultimately authorities decided not to charge her with anything related to the Little League.
The league never recouped any money. It was all just lost.
It's late into the summer, and those generous Michael Cochran legacy scholarships, which Natalie had promised students, are now supposed to be paid out.
There were 8 people in total. They are full-ride scholarships for up to 8 years.
Tony McCall's son was given one of those college scholarships.
There was no money. It was a fake scholarship. Natalie weaved such a web of lies. They were bizarre like that. It was still keeping us all in the flock.
Natalie Cochran has insisted the scholarships would have been paid if her assets hadn't eventually been frozen by the government, but investigators had a different view.
When she created these, we saw that as an attempt to dispel rumors. Rumors were circulating that her business was being looked at, that she didn't have this wealth and this money.
We had pretty clearly identified at least, and I may be under at least 10 known victims of the Ponzi scheme.
The most obvious red flag at the time was that nobody was getting any money back.
We had more than enough evidence and documentation to proceed with indictment.
So she's arrested.
Yes.
What did you think of that?
We were glad. When she was arrested, she was wearing the Tailgate Socialite t-shirt. That was the true Natalie right there.
Natalie Cochran faces 26 charges related to the fraud. She pleads not guilty, but her investors are deeply distraught over the hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost money.
I spent $256,000.
$511,000.
Almost $250,000 over the course of 2.5 years. We loved her and we believed her. Everything she told us, we believed everything she said to us.
Chris Davis says he too was taken in by his trust in Natalie and by the impressive paperwork she supplied.
It looks legitimate. I mean, there are a lot of companies and there are a lot of entities here. Why would she do this?
I don't know if it was the greed or the position or status.
Reaching a deal with prosecutors, Natalie pled guilty to 2 counts, an unlawful monetary transaction and wire fraud.
And then she went off to prison for 11 years for fraud.
She did. May 1st of 2021 is when she finally went into the prison at Hazleton.
The court also ordered her to pay back $2.5 million to the investors she fleeced. But with little income coming in, it will likely be a very long process.
Did you feel that was fair, that was right?
The judge said, if I could give you more, I would. He acknowledged the fact that the lawyers had reached this plea agreement and had capped what he could have done to her. So no, at that moment, I didn't believe it was fair. And just as I told the judge, there's 2.5 million reasons why it wasn't fair.
But this isn't over yet. A search warrant in the fraud case had led investigators into the Cochran home and brought an unexpected surprise.
They open the fridge, they find the vial of insulin. It's suspicious that it shouldn't be there. Nobody in the family is diabetic.
Does that insulin have anything to do with Michael Cochran's death? We'll hear from his wife Natalie for the first time as investigators hit her with some tough questions.
We'll be having a conversation with Natalie Cochran.
This investigation is just getting started.
At first, this was just a Ponzi scheme investigation.
But as authorities investigate the fraud case, they also began questioning Michael Cochran's unexpected death.
Michael Cochran, who was 38 years old, seemingly a fit, healthy man.
He took care of himself. He did worked out all the time.
To suddenly die in the midst of allegations of financial crimes, that's pretty suspicious.
No autopsy had been done on Michael Cochran. The death certificate issued by the hospice where he died listed natural causes.
There was no medical examiner involvement.
Natalie Cochran gave different versions of what happened with Michael on February the 6th to multiple people.
So authorities arrange a meeting with Natalie.
Today's date is April 8th, 2019.
I explained to her we were looking into Michael's death. Natalie, just tell me how things progressed with Michael.
February the 6th, whatever day we took him to the hospital, we went to the kitchen and all of a sudden he started throwing up in the sink. And I heard him hit his head, and then I went in there and he had fallen. And so I didn't know what to do because Michael was very adamant after we got out of the hospital last time. He said, if you ever take me to the hospital again, you're going to be dead.
It turns out Michael had been hospitalized for several days back in November for potential exposure to black mold. Natalie says she thought one of his training supplements could have been making him sick.
It was her belief that Michael had taken an overdose of this supplement that she alleged was coming from Mexico.
I'd always been arguing that this stuff's not safe. It even came in a bottle that said for animal use only, not for human ingestion. It's like syrup.
Right.
We're taking it to gain mass and to keep its stuff cut up.
Gotcha.
And it also had an insulin component in it, but bodybuilders can manipulate insulin to cut muscle.
She introduces insulin in the discussion as part of Michael Cochran's weightlifting regimen.
Mike was all about, he was just very into body.
Is there any chance that he would have purposely taken too much of that?
He did purposely take too much, but he was trying to super load.
There was always this effort to make sure that there was an explanation for insulin being somehow involved in Michael's death. In the third conversation, she brought up that Michael was injecting with insulin. She had done a complete pivot from where it was all this supplement. Now Michael's injecting insulin. The insulin he was doing through injection.
Correct. He would inject it before meals so that it would cover any carbs that he ate.
Insulin is used primarily by diabetics to essentially help us regulate the blood sugar in our body.
He wasn't diabetic, obviously.
No.
And remember, the fraud investigation is still ongoing. In June of 2019, federal and state authorities conduct a search of the Cochran house.
Natalie is there.
She was in the garage. The search warrant was done based off the financial crime information investigation only.
We anticipated finding additional evidence regarding this Ponzi scheme.
But they found something else they didn't expect.
Sometimes things happen in investigations that you call it fate. I started rummaging through the refrigerator, and there's this bottle of insulin sitting right there.
It shouldn't be there. Nobody in the family is diabetic.
That was huge. Where did it come from? Whose is it?
Natalie's got the same answer for authorities and for Michael's mother.
She said, oh, they came here and they took everything. And she said they even took the insulin out of the refrigerator.
Now, what did you make of that? Did anybody take insulin in the house?
No. I said, insulin? What are you doing with the insulin in the refrigerator? I keep that here, she said, for Gavin when he came over if he needed a shock, because he's a diabetic.
You believed it?
We did.
Remember, Gavin is Chris and Jennifer Davis's son. They tell authorities they never stored his insulin at the Cochran house. But then they recall the bag they left for Natalie the morning Michael collapsed.
The investigator said, did she ever borrow insulin from you? And that's when Jennifer was like, yeah, she needed it. She had cancer and she got sick. And that's when they were like, you know when? And I felt like at that moment, we both were like, oh my goodness. Because now we know that she's a thief and a fraud.
When we started seeing the text messages with Jennifer Davis about insulin, it was very revealing. If you believe the previous things that Natalie has said, she should have already had insulin readily available in the home. So it made no sense to go through all this effort. I think it's clear that she poisoned him with insulin.
Authorities develop a theory of how Natalie may have used insulin to kill Michael.
When he's finally taken to the emergency room, he presented with a blood sugar level of 21, and he's not diabetic.
You get low blood sugar by receiving too much insulin. Natalie had access to insulin. She had the means to inject it. She knew exactly what insulin would do.
Investigators believe there's enough circumstantial evidence to tie Natalie to Michael's death.
39-year-old Natalie Cochran is now accused of the February 2019 murder of her husband, Michael.
Natalie Cochran pleads not guilty. Was that hard for you to accept that your daughter-in-law is being accused of killing your son?
Yeah, it was really hard to believe because, I mean, how do you kill somebody that you're supposed to love and they're your children's father?
But why would Natalie want to kill her husband?
The investigators thought the text messages looked suspicious.
Michael didn't know about the Ponzi scheme, but he was learning.
Michael was about to discover he didn't have millions, perhaps $1 billion of legitimately earned income inbound from the federal government, and that was a problem for Natalie.
Here is exactly the motive of why she felt like she had to kill Michael.
Opening arguments began today in the Natalie Cochran trial.
In January, more than 3 years after she was indicted for the first-degree murder of her husband, Michael, Natalie Cochran's trial is finally underway.
There were media outlets from all over the country here. The interest in this case was huge.
You may be seated.
For Michael's family and friends, the 3-year wait for justice has been agonizing. How tough was that for you all to just have this thing drag on before it's going to be resolved?
It was hard.
Yes, very hard.
Spent lots of time praying.
What was it like for you to see Natalie in that courtroom?
I can't say that I really even thought about her. We just had to get justice for Michael.
Natalie Cochran is a young woman. An 11-year sentence with good time served for the Ponzi scheme is relatively short versus a life sentence for murder. Those stakes are incredibly high.
All right, now, Mr. Truman, you may proceed.
Thank you. On February the 5th of 2019, Michael Cochran was a 200-pound, healthy 38-year-old man. By midday of February 6th of 2019, he had lost consciousness, and he would never regain consciousness. The state needs to get ahead of the fact that it's an entirely circumstantial case. You got to tell the jury, you're not going to get the stuff you get on TV. There's no DNA, there's no fingerprints, this is it. But that's enough to convict.
This is a complex case, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, but it's built by the state of West Virginia on conjectures and innuendos, and glaringly lacking in motive and the evidence necessary to prove that my client killed her husband.
Natalie understood that we cannot present a defense that would somehow skirt the issue of the Ponzi scheme or that would hide it from the jury. We admitted to the jury what was well known to everybody.
The fact that she is perhaps a fraud and perhaps a cheat, and that you wouldn't perhaps want to invite her home for Sunday dinner, that you wouldn't like her, does not translate into being a murderer.
We absolutely believe that the imminent failure of the Ponzi scheme was Natalie's motive to kill Michael. That was going to happen, and it was going to happen very, very quickly if she didn't act.
What Michael Cochran didn't know is certainly one of the most important questions here. But to me, what's more important is what he was about to know, the consequences that would come when he found out that information.
And at the heart of the case, a vial of insulin.
Prosecutors called that the murder weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What keeps Gavin alive, she used to kill. She used to take life.
On the morning of February 6th, Jennifer Davis remembers getting a text from Natalie asking to borrow that insulin. She testifies about that exchange.
Can you just explain to me what's going on in this conversation?
She said that her and Mike, they were both sick, and she had to start taking small insulin shots.
Did you provide that insulin to her?
I put the insulin in a bag and gave it to my husband, and he dropped it off on the porch on the way to work.
Several hours later, Natalie sends Jennifer a picture of Michael unconscious on the kitchen floor.
What did this picture mean to you when you received it?
Just that it was just shocking that he was laying there.
Natalie contacts 2 construction workers that had worked for the family, says, Michael's on the floor. I'm gonna need help picking him up from the floor and taking him into the living room.
So after Chris Davis drops off the bag of insulin, Natalie sends out a text. She invites several friends over throughout the day to check on his condition and essentially make sure he's okay, but not take him to the hospital.
In a statement to ABC News, Natalie Cochran says that, quote, Mike hated the hospital. He threatened several people that we better not take him back.
Stephanie Hamilton, a physician's assistant, came over to check Michael out and found him non-responsive.
What did you specifically notice?
That he needed to be checked. I said even people with the history of seizures, anytime they have one, they need to be checked. I kept offering, like, I would go with her. She said she was gonna let him sleep it off.
You also heard from her later today. Take a look at that. 21. What does that mean?
No one should ever have a blood sugar of 21.
What's gonna happen if they do?
They're in a coma. Probably near death.
At some point, you go over.
Yes, and I walk in the living room. He's laying on the couch like he's sleeping.
What did you do?
So I go over to him. I just remember saying, man, hey, buddy, I'm going to take you to the hospital. And that's exactly what I did.
But by this time, it's too late. Michael gets to the hospital, but the damage has been done.
Take a moment, you're okay.
Chris, it was very tough for you in court when they showed you the photo that you had already seen of Mike.
Yeah.
Why did it hit you so hard?
I wished I could have got to him first.
Over 2 days, prosecutors have meticulously laid out the timeline of the day Michael Cochran died. The question now, will they be able to prove that it was his wife, Natalie, who killed him?
Mr. Truman, you may call your first witness.
As prosecutors lay out their case against Natalie Cochran, they intend to show that she not only had the means, but the motive and the opportunity to kill her husband, Michael, back in February of 2019.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Robert Heinzman.
Raise your right hand, please, sir.
Bob Heinzman was the primary investigator of the defendant's Ponzi scheme, and he explained there was really no evidence that Michael knew what was going on. Now, the defense has floated the theory that Michael Cochran was up to his eyeballs in this Ponzi scheme. From your investigation, do you have any evidence that would support that?
He believed that they had obtained contracts and that they would be receiving money for these contracts.
Do you have any evidence that he knew that this was a fraud being carried on?
No.
It was important to hammer home that Michael Cochran was at least cognizant of the scheme because it would destroy the state's theory of why it happened. Have you, in your thorough investigation of this case, talked to the children of Mr. and Mrs. Cochran?
No.
Would it surprise you if I told you that they observed their parents work on the federal contracts, and you're telling this jury that he had no knowledge of these contracts?
I'm not telling the jury that. I said that he knew about the contracts that he was led to believe were bid on by their business.
The investigation had revealed that Michael was beginning to ask some really tough questions of Natalie about where the money was going.
The day before, February 5th of 2019, it was arranged by the Cochrans to charter a flight from Beckley down to Lynchburg, Virginia to meet with the Bank of America banker. And of course, that was a meeting that Natalie could never allow to happen, because if it did happen, then Michael would know, and that would have been the end of her Ponzi scheme.
Court Nexon was an employee of Bank of America. He testified via Zoom in this trial because he's not local.
And that was to take place February 6th of 2019, correct?
Correct. Looks like they said they were going to fly in, and so we were basically responding to their schedule and setting things up as best we could.
Did that meeting take place?
Never took place.
Natalie was becoming desperate at this point.
Prosecutors argue that if Michael was in the dark, Natalie's deception was about to come to light.
Putting Jennifer Davis on the stand explains how Natalie got the insulin that she needed to kill Michael.
Jennifer, at this point, you were offering to help out a friend in need. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Did she accept your offer of help?
Yes, she did. She asked if she could borrow a vial of insulin.
According to Dr. Uribe, who was one of our forensic pathologists, the only way that Michael's blood sugar could have plummeted to 21 was if someone else had given him insulin.
There was profound hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is low blood glucose. Once he was treated for the hypoglycemia, the blood sugar went up and then it went back down again. To me, that is a significant pattern.
And why is that pattern significant to you?
Because there are only a few things that can do that. One of the big things is insulin administration.
But the defense poses an important question. Could Michael have injected himself as part of a bodybuilding regimen? Dr. Uribe pushes back against that suggestion.
To my knowledge, bodybuilders don't use insulin.
During the murder investigation, Michael's remains were exhumed, and Dr. Uribe conducted an autopsy.
And what did you determine were Michael Cochran's cause and manner of death?
I came to the conclusion that the cause of death was exogenous insulin administration.
Your Honor, the state calls Timothy Bledsoe to the stand. Tim was able to draw all of the parallels and connect all of the pieces. He was able to explain for the jury how and why the Ponzi scheme and the failure of the Ponzi scheme led to the murder of Michael Cochran.
It was about telling that story, you know, another piece to the puzzle. And I think overall, I think we were successful.
And we previously heard Jennifer Davis testify that she had insulin sent to the defendant's home. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Do you recall why the defendant needed the insulin that morning?
I believe it was something related to cancer treatment.
And throughout the entire course of your investigation, did you ever uncover any evidence that the defendant had cancer?
No.
Did you waver at all? Did you wonder maybe the prosecutors had this wrong, that it was just a horrible set of circumstances?
Not once they talked to us. And then I started going back through, you know, my text, and, you know, Chris and I started talking, and then I was just in shock, disbelief. I'm still in shock. It just doesn't seem real at all. But it was hard.
Prosecutors have rested their case. Now it's the defense's turn to persuade the jury that Natalie Cochran is innocent. And to do that, they bring in their own star witnesses, Michael and Natalie's children.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state has wrapped its case of circumstantial evidence. Now it's the defense's turn.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Good morning. They believe there's not enough evidence to prove that Natalie Cochran killed her husband, Michael.
The atmosphere in the courtroom was, what's the defense going to bring? You could sense some anxiety there of what the defense was going to say about Michael to try and explain away Natalie's actions.
The defense has already told the jury that Michael Cochran was, quote, a ticking bomb because of his alleged medical problems and health history. Their game plan is to discredit the prosecution's case and Michael Cochran himself.
There was no forensic evidence to tie her to a murder. Zero forensic evidence.
They called two surprising witnesses to the stand, Natalie and Michael's children.
Would you state your name for the record?
Nicole Cochran.
Okay. What type of medication was he taking?
I know that he took steroids and he took many other supplements.
Did he do it daily?
Yes, every morning.
Was he into supplements and vitamins and all of that stuff?
Oh, absolutely. He took his supplements, his pre-workouts, and those things. He tried to take care of his body.
He would lay all of his pills out on the counter, and there would be so many of them that they would just sit in a whole circle, and it looked like the size of a dinner plate. And then he would scoop them handfuls at a time into his mouth.
The theory by the defense counsel is that Michael Cochran was not a healthy individual.
Did you start noticing changes in your father's health?
He was very agitated and angry, more so than not. and he was having a lot of headaches.
The defense asked the same line of questioning to the Cochran's son, whose face is concealed on the witness stand because he's a minor.
Did he ever inject anything?
Definitely steroids.
He took supplements and things like that. Did he take steroids?
He never took any steroids. If you would see him, everything that he has, all the muscles he has, is natural, hard work.
Mike wasn't a bodybuilder. He ate too much pizza to be a bodybuilder. Was he fit? He was. Was he in shape? He was. Did he work hard for that? He did.
And he was taking things from Mexico, they were saying, things that were not approved by the FDA.
What did he get from Mexico, do you know?
I don't know the name of the steroid, but it was definitely an anabolic.
What was that like to see them testifying on their mother's behalf?
You know, they love their mother. Of course, they're going to defend their mother. But the things they said about their father was really heartbreaking.
Defense lawyers argue that Michael Cochran was not exactly a healthy 38-year-old and that his lifestyle led to 4 hospital visits between 2017 and the time of his death in 2019.
He got sick, and I feel like around that time is when you could just notice that he started to change a little bit, just forgetting stuff all the time. And he was more aggressive.
Towards whom? Aggressive?
Towards everybody.
Natalie had told friends and family that her husband also suffered from seizures, plus symptoms of black mold poisoning from renovations he did on their house.
Oh, had you heard of him having seizures?
We were told that he had seizures and he was exposed to black mold.
The defense also tries to hammer away at the state's motive, the Ponzi scheme. They claim Natalie Cochran wasn't the only one involved. They say Michael was too.
I always saw him working on his computer, and he would say that that's what he was doing.
Say that he was doing what?
That he was filling out contracts.
Did your mother do that?
No.
Who was working on the contracts?
My dad.
We had heard that Natalie Cochran was going to take the stand. She had informed the judge that she was going to testify in her own behalf. And at the last minute, she decided that she wasn't going to testify.
The jury was extremely attentive, but the jury was never more invested in what was being said than in the closing arguments.
All right, are you folks ready to deliver your closing remarks?
Natalie was a diabetic counselor and a pharmacist. She knew that injecting insulin into a non-diabetic would cause harm.
Is that the action of a planning cold-blooded killer? She would get that insulin ahead of time, not on the day of the murder, and involve 2 witnesses against her right there and then.
She chose over and over, after repeated pleas from friends and loved ones, to leave Michael on the couch.
It's a horrible tragedy, but a tragedy, not a murder.
The state failed to answer a couple of questions, and that is, when did it happen? Where did it happen? How did it happen?
There was no deductive reasoning where you would say, well, it was Professor Plum with the candlestick in the study.
Well, it was actually the pharmacist in the kitchen, according to the prosecution's theory.
She had a clear motive, and you saw that leading up to this date, Michael was about to find out what she was doing to people. Do we know what he was going to do with that information? We never will, because he won't have the chance to tell us.
Ms. Cochran is committed crimes of fraud, but that doesn't make her a murderer. We're asking you to find her not guilty.
21 was such a crucial number because nobody's blood glucose should be at that level unless you've had an injection of insulin.
A normal blood glucose level would be anywhere from 70 to around 130.
21. And that's the number we're going to rely on to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt that this defendant killed Michael Cochran. Find this defendant guilty of first-degree murder, because that's exactly what she did.
The case is now in the hands of the jury. Were prosecutors able to convince them that Natalie Cochran killed her husband? Or did the defense poke enough holes to sow reasonable doubt?
People yell out, "There's a verdict," and then people start scurrying to get a seat inside the courtroom.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes, sir. When that verdict comes back, they were shocked.
The verdict, handed down just weeks ago, came quickly. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours.
Would the defendant please rise? The jury verdict is as follows. The defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree.
What was it like when you heard guilty?
We were so happy because we're finally getting justice for Michael after all these years.
You know, I could just feel my spirit and everything just went, you know, this is what it's supposed to be.
It was exhilarating to hear the word guilty. And all I can think is we did it, we got her.
And the jury's not finished. They've got another decision to make, what's known as the mercy phase.
Good morning, members of the jury. Good morning. You are back.
Mercy, which means the defendant gets parole eligibility after serving 15 years, or no mercy, which means there's no eligibility for parole.
You'll raise your right hand, please.
A slew of Natalie Cochran's family, including her mom, tearfully take the stand.
I beg. I don't know what else I can say except please give mercy to her.
For a second time, Natalie's 19-year-old daughter faces the jury that's already convicted her mom in her father's murder.
I missed her at my high school graduation, and I missed her on the day I moved into college. I'm begging you to give her mercy so that I don't have to miss more.
Natalie Cochran's family ended up leaving when the family of Michael Cochran, when they were up there.
Raise your right hand, please, ma'am.
We, along with our family and friends, have sat quietly and graciously and painfully watched and listened as Michael's good name has been murdered time and time again.
It was one of the most intense pieces of testimony in the entire trial.
This spoiled, evil, narcissistic murderer had seldom, if ever, been denied this which she wanted. She will try to blame my precious son Michael for her evilness and deceit.
Do you remember what you said that you felt the strongest about?
When I said that please, please, don't give her any mercy, we ask that you please, please, no mercy. She never gave Michael any mercy.
I think it was extremely riveting for the jury to see.
We, the jury, unanimously do not recommend mercy.
Natalie Cochran will spend the rest of her life in prison.
But the pain lives on for Michael's friends, Jennifer and Chris, whose son's insulin may very well have been used to end their friend's life.
I trusted her, and that's the exact same thing she used and borrowed from me, and that's hard, and that's something I'll have to live with.
As far as I'm concerned, justice has been done. She's where she needs to be.
You've lost your son, you've lost financially, you've lost a lot.
Yes, we have, but we have each other and we're strong for each other. That's the only way we can get by, and because of God.
What about your grandchildren? Do you hope to have a relationship at some point with them?
Right now, I think it's best the way that it is. I don't see them coming around, and we have to accept it and just go on.
Just days after the verdict, I visited with Michael's parents. His stepfather, Ed, took me to a special place they've created to honor their son's memory. This is your memorial to Michael?
Yeah, I'm not able to get up there to his gravesite much. So I said, well, keep it, right here close. Anytime we want to go, we can just come right here.
What do you think about when you come out here and sit on that bench?
When Donna and I sometimes we kind of sit around down here There'll be like a butterfly that'll come around. And I told Don, I said, there's little Michael. So we've got a little cutout flower over there that he's always down here.
Such an emotional story to report on, David. Those heartbroken parents placing a memorial bench where they can always remember their son, Michael.
We should note tonight that Natalie Cochran does plan to appeal her murder conviction. In the meantime, that is our program for tonight. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
Northern California to conduct a face-to-face interview, but his wife was able to produce photographic evidence proving he had indeed attended the dinner. The guest cooperatively provided a reference sample of his deoxyribonucleic acid, which did not match the profile recovered from the headboard. The focus then shifted to the contractors who had recently worked on the property. Amanda identified Sean Bloom, a general contractor who had recently been terminated by Nancy after a contentious dispute over payments. Sean's text messages to Nancy were aggressive, threatening legal action if he was not paid. Immediately, detectives located Sean, who openly admitted his dislike for Nancy, but voluntarily submitted his deoxyribonucleic acid, which quickly eliminated him as a suspect. Investigators also explored potential conflicts within Nancy's family. Nancy's son, Chad, had been estranged from his mother for 5 years, harboring resentment over religious differences. Digital records revealed that Nancy had sent a text message to Chad on the night of her disappearance, attempting to find common ground. Chad refused to come to the sheriff's station or provide a DNA sample, expressing deep distrust of law enforcement. Detectives placed Chad under surveillance, watching him consume several beverages at a local establishment. When he drove away, deputies initiated a traffic stop, arresting him for an open container violation and securing the discarded beverage containers for forensic testing. Chad's profile did not match the evidence from the crime scene, clearing him of involvement. The investigation began to stall. Weeks turned into months, and despite extensive ground searches of the surrounding foothills, riverbeds, and valleys, Nancy remained missing. The public grew increasingly frustrated, accusing the sheriff's office of failing to make progress. In a desperate bid to break the case, detectives decided to utilize a cutting-edge digital investigative tool, a geofence warrant. At the time, this was one of the first instances of a geofence warrant being executed in the state of California. Investigators secured a warrant requiring Google to provide the location data of any mobile devices that were present within a precise virtual perimeter around Nancy's cottage during the critical hours of her disappearance. The timeline had been established by a critical forensic detail. Nancy's phone. Records revealed an attempted 911 call at 12:17 in the morning on May 5th, a call that was terminated in 0 seconds, suggesting her. Attacker had seized the device as she tried to summon help. When Google returned the geofence data, investigators systematically mapped the devices. While the majority belonged to the sleeping wedding guests, they identified an anomalous device that had pinged inside Nancy's studio cottage at 1:33 and 1:52 in the morning. Detectives secured a follow-up warrant to obtain the subscriber information for that specific device. The result was a revelation that redirected the entire case. The phone belonged to Carlo Fuentes Flores, a quiet, polite 37-year-old painter who had been working on the renovations at Paradise Ranch. Carlo was a family man, a father who frequently spoke of his devotion to his young daughter. He had no criminal record in the United States or Mexico, and those who employed him described him as a meticulous, courteous professional. There was no obvious motive, no history of conflict between Carlo and Nancy. However, a forensic examination of Carlo's digital history exposed a dark, hidden persona. Investigators discovered that Carlo frequently utilized his device to search for explicit material involving older women, specifically using terms such as cougar. His search history also revealed that he frequently sought out escorts, and his device contained numerous self-shot videos of his encounters. To secure definitive proof, investigators placed Carlo under surveillance. They followed him to a local restaurant where he dined with his wife. When he departed, investigators recovered the plastic beverage bottle he had used. The forensic laboratory extracted a deoxyribonucleic acid profile from the bottle, comparing it to the blood-stained handprint on Nancy's headboard. It was a perfect match. On December 18th, 2018, detectives brought Carlo Fuentes Flores to the station for questioning. The interrogation, conducted by Detective Clint Cole, began gently. Carlo was cooperative, discussing his painting work on the property and confirming his familiarity with the layout of Nancy's cottage. When Detective Cole asked if he had returned to the property on the night of Nancy's disappearance, Carlo denied it, asserting he had no knowledge of her fate. Detective Cole then revealed the forensic evidence, stating they had recovered his deoxyribonucleic acid from the bedroom. The psychological impact of this revelation was immediate. Carlo's posture slumped, his breathing became shallow, and he whispered that he had made a Terrible mistake. He initially attempted to construct a narrative of an accident, claiming he had returned to the property in his truck to retrieve a ladder and had accidentally struck Nancy with his vehicle, subsequently bringing her inside to help her. But under relentless, methodical questioning, his fabrication collapsed. Carlo confessed that he had consumed a large amount of alcohol and returned to the property with the intent of sexually assaulting Nancy, having misinterpreted her warmth and her gift of homemade tamales as flirtation. He admitted to entering her cottage as she slept, raping her, and subsequently smothering her with a pillow to prevent her from identifying him. In a stunning development, Carlo offered to lead detectives to her remains. He was placed in a police vehicle, directing investigators on an hour-long journey east, deep into the remote, arid landscape of the Carrizo Plain. In a desolate area near a small pile of rocks, investigators discovered Nancy scattered remains, which had been subjected to months of animal activity. Upon seeing the sight, Carlo fell to his knees, weeping and expressing contrition. He wrote a letter of apology to Nancy's family and his own before being formally arrested and charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances. In January of 2022, rather than face a public trial, Carlo entered a slow plea, allowing the judge to review the overwhelming evidence, including his recorded confession and jailhouse phone calls to his wife. The court found him guilty of first-degree murder during the commission of a rape and burglary, sentencing him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. These two cases, unfolding in different regions of the American West, offer profound insights into the nature of human deception and the relentless pursuit of justice. In both instances, the perpetrators sought to hide behind a mask of social respectability. Corey Richins as a devoted mother and author, and Carlo Fuentes Flores as a quiet, hard-working craftsman. Yet, through the meticulous application of modern forensic science, digital tracking, and patient interrogation, their double lives were exposed, bringing definitive closure to the families of Eric Richins and Nancy Woodrum, and reminding us that the truth, however deeply buried, will eventually find its way to the light. The human capacity for deception is one of the most complex subjects in criminal psychology. Investigators, forensic analysts, and psychologists frequently encounter cases where an individual constructs an elaborate, respectable public persona to mask a deeply troubled or predatory nature. These masks are often held in place by social status, community involvement, or professional success, making the eventual revelation of the truth all the more shocking to those who knew them. In the field of criminal justice, the unraveling of these deceptive facades requires not only advanced forensic science, but also meticulous, patient, investigative work. By analyzing physical evidence, digital footprints, and behavioral patterns, law enforcement professionals can piece together the true sequence of events, ensuring that justice is served and the memory of the victims is honored. We examined two highly significant cases that illustrate the contrast between a carefully curated public image and a dark, hidden reality. The first case takes us to the mountain communities of Summit County, Utah, where a successful businesswoman and author attempted to use her professional platform and a narrative of grief to conceal a calculated crime. The second case leads to the scenic hills of Paso Robles, California, where a beloved community member vanished from her home, prompting an innovative digital investigation that ultimately exposed a predator living in plain sight. In the picturesque valleys of Summit County, Utah, the communities of Park City and Heber City are known for their beautiful landscapes, affluent neighborhoods, and close-knit social circles. It was here that Corey Richens, an ambitious real estate agent, built her life alongside her husband, Eric Richens. Eric was a highly respected, successful stonemason who owned and operated a thriving million-dollar business named C&E Masonry. He was a dedicated father to their three young sons who were 10, 9, and 6 years old, and was deeply involved in their lives, serving as a youth soccer coach and an active participant in their daily routines. To outward appearances, the Richens family represented the ideal of American prosperity and domestic happiness. They lived in a beautiful home, traveled frequently, and were well regarded by their neighbors and friends. Corey, who had grown up in a hardworking family that moved frequently due to construction, work had established her own home flipping business, Corey Richens Realty. She was highly driven, managing multiple renovation projects and striving to achieve the level of wealth she had observed while cleaning the luxury homes of Park City during her youth. However, on the morning of March 4th, 2022, this picture of domestic bliss was permanently shattered at approximately after 3 o'clock. In the morning, Corey called 911, reporting that her husband was cold to the touch and not breathing. Emergency medical technicians and sheriff deputies were dispatched to the residence in Camas, Utah. Upon their arrival, they found Eric lying on his back on the bedroom floor. Despite the efforts of first responders who utilized a cardiopulmonary resuscitation machine, Eric was officially declared dead at 3:58 in the morning. In the immediate aftermath of the tragedy, Corey presented herself as a devastated, grieving widow. She explained to the responding officers that she and Eric had been celebrating a major financial milestone for her real estate business earlier that evening. According to her initial statement, they had shared a drink to celebrate the purchase of a property at approximately 9:00 in the evening. She further claimed that she had spent the night in her son's bedroom because the child was suffering from night terrors, and when she returned to her own bedroom later that night, she discovered her husband unresponsive. The tragedy took the community by surprise. Eric was 39 years old, highly athletic, and had no known history of serious medical conditions. Initially, first responders and medical professionals speculated that Eric might have suffered a sudden brain aneurysm, a hypothesis that seemed to offer a plausible explanation for the sudden loss of a healthy young man. In the months that followed, Corey channeled her experience into a new creative endeavor. She wrote and self-published a children's book titled Are You With Me?, designed to help young children navigate the difficult emotions of losing a loved one. The book, written from the perspective of a child wondering if their deceased father was still present in their life, featured touching illustrations of her family and was dedicated to her husband. Corey embarked on a media campaign to promote the book, appearing on local television programs such as Good Things Utah, and sharing her insights on coping with grief as a mother and a widow. Her public appearances painted a picture of a resilient, compassionate woman who was dedicated to helping others heal from tragedy. Yet behind this public facade of maternal devotion and literary success, a highly complex and contentious legal battle was already unfolding. Just 2 days after Eric's death, a major dispute arose at the family home. Corey, believing that her husband's will was kept in a safe at the residence, hired a locksmith to gain access to it. Eric's sister, Amy Richins, was present at the home and vehemently objected to this action. The confrontation escalated, with Amy revealing a closely guarded secret. Eric had secretly established a trust and that effectively excluded Corey from his estate and his masonry business. According to the estate planning documents, Eric had appointed his sister, Katie Richins Benson, as the trustee and executor of his estate, with his 3 young sons named as the primary beneficiaries. This decision had been prompted by discoveries Eric had made in 2020. He had learned that Corey had taken out a line of credit for $250,000 against their home, which was solely owned by Eric, without his knowledge or consent. This discovery had shaken Eric's trust in his wife and led him to consult with a divorce attorney, and restructure his estate to ensure his children's financial security. The realization that she had been excluded from the estate and that the family home was held in the trust rather than belonging to her provoked an intense emotional reaction from Corey. The dispute with Amy Richins resulted in physical contact, leading to Corey being charged with assault, to which she eventually entered a plea of no contest. This highly public conflict immediately raised questions among Eric's family and law enforcement investigators regarding the true nature of the Richins' marriage and the potential motives behind Eric's sudden demise. The investigation into Eric's death intensified significantly when the forensic toxicology report was completed. The medical examiner determined that Eric had not died of an aneurysm or any natural cause. Instead, the cause of death was determined to be acute fentanyl intoxication. The toxicology analysis revealed that Eric's system contained over 5 times the lethal dosage of fentanyl, and, crucially, the substance was identified as illicitly manufactured rather than a medical-grade prescription. This revelation transformed the case from a tragic medical mystery into a homicide investigation. Detectives with the Summit County Sheriff's Office began a comprehensive review of Corey's financial records, digital communications, and personal relationships. They quickly discovered that her real estate business, while outwardly successful, was in a state of severe financial distress. Corey had accumulated millions of dollars in debt, utilizing high-interest short-term loans to fund her ambitious renovation projects, including the purchase of a partially completed luxury mansion in Midway, Utah, valued at nearly $3 million. Investigators also learned that Eric's death was not the first time he had suffered a sudden, life-threatening medical episode. In 2019, while on a trip to Greece, Eric had become violently ill after consuming a drink provided to him by Corey. He had contacted his sister, expressing a fear that his wife had attempted to poison him. More recently, on Valentine's Day in 2022, just weeks before his death, Corey had purchased a bagel sandwich for Eric from a local establishment. After taking a single bite of the sandwich, Eric experienced a severe allergic reaction, requiring him to administer his son's epinephrine autoinjector and take antihistamines before falling into a deep sleep. He texted friends afterward, stating that he believed his wife had tried to poison him. To build a comprehensive case, investigators needed to identify the source of the illicit fentanyl that had ended Eric's life. By analyzing Corey's phone records, they identified frequent communications with Carmen Lauber, a woman who had previously worked for Corey's real estate business as a house cleaner. Lauber possessed a criminal record involving narcotics, making her a person of interest. When confronted by law enforcement, Lauber agreed to cooperate with the investigation. She revealed that Corey had contacted her on multiple occasions, requesting strong prescription pain medication for an investor who was allegedly suffering from a back injury. Lauber admitted that she had procured hydrocodone pills and delivered them to Corey in early 2022. Shortly thereafter, Corey contacted her again, asking for something stronger, specifically mentioning fentanyl. Lauber obtained the illicit fentanyl from a local supplier, Robert Crozier, and left the drugs at one of Corey's home renovation properties. According to Lauber, Corey requested an additional supply of fentanyl a few weeks later, claiming that the first batch was not powerful enough. The timing of these drug transactions aligned precisely with the key events leading to Eric's death. The first delivery of fentanyl occurred shortly before the Valentine's Day incident, and the second delivery took place just days before Eric's fatal overdose on March 4th. As the financial and toxicological evidence mounted, investigators uncovered another potential motive: Corey's personal life. Phone records reveal that she had been engaged in a long-term extramarital affair with Josh Grossman, a handyman who worked on her properties. The two had exchanged thousands of text messages expressing deep romantic feelings and discussing a future together. Corey had envisioned a life where she and Grossman would live in the guest house of the Midway Mansion, operating it as a highly profitable event venue. Crucially, 48 hours before Eric's death, Corey sent a text message to Grossman asking him to hang in there until Friday, promising that life would be different. On May 8th, 2023, Corey Richins was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and possession of controlled substances with the intent to distribute. The arrest of a prominent local businesswoman and the author of a children's book on grief attracted national media attention, transforming the quiet community of Summit County into the focus of a major legal drama. While held in the Summit County Jail pending trial, Corey's actions continued to draw scrutiny. During a routine search of her cell, corrections officers discover a handwritten 4-page letter addressed to her mother, Lisa Darden. The letter, which began with the phrase "walk the dog," contained detailed instructions for her mother to relay to Corey's brother, Ronnie. Corey instructed her brother to testify that Eric had obtained pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico through ranch workers, an attempt to establish an alternative explanation for the presence of the drugs in his system. The prosecution presented this letter as clear evidence of witness tampering and consciousness of guilt while Corey's defense team argued that the document was a draft of a fictional manuscript she was writing. The legal proceedings faced several complications, including a change in Corey's defense counsel. Her initial attorney, Sky Lozuro, withdrew from the case due to a conflict of interest, and she was replaced by experienced public defenders, Kathy Nestor and Wendy Lewis. Corey maintained her innocence, releasing an audio statement from jail asserting her dedication to protecting her family and denying any involvement in her husband's death. The trial of Corey Richins began in a Summit County courtroom, drawing widespread interest. The prosecution, led by Brad Bloodworth, presented a detailed narrative of financial desperation, infidelity, and premeditated poisoning. They called numerous witnesses, including Eric's sister, Katie, who delivered emotional testimony about the loss of her brother, and Carmen Lauber, who detailed the transactions involving the acquisition of the fentanyl. Corey's former best friend, Allie Stakings, also took the stand, recounting the conversations surrounding the Valentine's Day incident. One of the most dramatic moments of the trial occurred when Josh Grossman, Corey's former lover, was called to testify. Grossman, visibly emotional and uncomfortable, confirmed the nature of their relationship and the text messages they had exchanged. He recounted a conversation that took place after Eric's death, in which Corey had asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service in Iraq and how it had made him feel. In a surprising turn of events, the defense team chose to rest their case without presenting any witnesses or calling Corey to the stand. They argued that the prosecution had failed to meet the high burden of proof, pointing out that there was no direct physical evidence linking Corey to the administration of the drugs or proving how the fentanyl had entered Eric's system. After a trial lasting several weeks, the jury, consisting of 6 men and 2 women, retired to deliberate. In just under 3 hours, they returned with a unanimous verdict, finding Corey Richins guilty of aggravated murder and all other remaining charges. The verdict brought a sense of closure to Eric's family, who expressed gratitude for the efforts of the prosecution and law enforcement. Following the trial, custody of the 3 young boys was permanently established with one of Eric's sisters, ensuring they would be raised in a stable, supportive environment. Corey Richins faced a sentence of up to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with her sentencing scheduled for what would have been Eric's 44th birthday. While the community of Summit County processed the resolution of the Richins case, a different but equally compelling investigation had reached its conclusion in the Central Coast region of California. This second case highlighted how innovative digital forensics can solve a baffling disappearance and bring a hidden predator to justice. Paso Robles, California, is a region defined by its natural beauty, characterized by rolling hills, ancient oak trees, and world-renowned vineyards. It is a destination that attracts visitors seeking a quiet, scenic retreat. Within this peaceful setting, Nancy Woodrum, a 62-year-old grandmother and salon owner, lived on her ranch-style property known as Paradise Ranch. Nancy was a deeply respected figure in the community, known for her warm, generous nature and her active involvement as a devout Jehovah's Witness. On Saturday, May 5th, 2018, Nancy failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study, an absence that immediately alarmed her daughter, Amanda. Amanda contacted a neighbor to check on her mother. The neighbor discovered that the front door of Nancy's cottage was wide open. The television was playing loudly, and Nancy was nowhere to be found. Amanda rushed to the property and entered the cottage. Inside, she discovered a scene that suggested a violent struggle. There were significant bloodstains on the carpet, on a pillow, on the headboard of the bed, and blood spatter on the walls. Nancy's purse, keys, cell phone, and vehicles were all left behind, indicating that she had not departed voluntarily. Amanda immediately contacted 911 to report her mother missing. The investigation was assigned to the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Office, with senior deputies and detectives, including Clinton Cole, responding to the scene. The timing of the disappearance was particularly challenging, as a wedding party consisting of more than 20 guests was staying at the main house on the Paradise Ranch property. The bride was sleeping in a guest area, separated from Nancy's cottage by a single wall. Despite the proximity of so many people, no one reported hearing any unusual sounds or witnessing anything suspicious on the night Nancy disappeared. Investigators began a meticulous search of the property and the surrounding area. They discovered tire tracks in the driveway and faint scuffle marks on the ground, suggesting a physical altercation had occurred outside the cottage. A major breakthrough occurred later that evening when an officer with the California Highway Patrol discovered bedding and clothing scattered along La Ponza Road, approximately 6 miles from the ranch. Amanda confirmed that these items, which bore significant bloodstains, belonged to her mother, suggesting that Nancy had been wrapped in the bedding and transported from the scene. Initially, detectives faced a daunting task, as the large number of wedding guests represented a pool of potential suspects who had access to the property. Investigators systematically interviewed every guest, obtaining statements and deoxyribonucleic acid samples to rule out their involvement. One guest whose Initial reluctance to cooperate raised suspicions was thoroughly investigated and cleared when his wife provided photographs confirming his presence at A rehearsal dinner at the time of the disappearance. The search for Nancy extended into the surrounding hills, riverbeds, and rural roads, utilizing search and rescue teams, helicopters, and tracking dogs. The community rallied to support the family, organizing search parties and distributing flyers. As the search continued, detectives turned their attention to other individuals who had recently visited the property. Nancy had been preparing to sell Paradise Ranch so she could devote herself full-time to her ministry, and several contractors had been performing renovations on the home. One contractor, Sean Bloom, had engaged in a heated dispute with Nancy over payments and the quality of his work, making him a prime person of interest. However, Bloom cooperated fully with investigators, voluntarily providing a deoxyribonucleic acid sample that did not match the evidence found at the scene. Detectives also investigated Nancy's estranged son, Chad, who had a history of conflict with his mother, although Chad initially refused to provide a sample. Investigators obtained his deoxyribonucleic acid from discarded beer bottles during a surveillance operation, successfully clearing him as a suspect. With no viable leads and the investigation beginning to stall, detectives decided to employ an innovative investigative technique that was relatively new to law enforcement in California: geofencing, by securing a search warrant for Google location data. Investigators established a virtual boundary around Nancy's cottage and the surrounding property. They requested data for a specific time window on the night of the disappearance, a timeline established by an interrupted 911 call that had been placed from Nancy's phone at 12:17 in the morning. The geofence results provided a critical piece of information. While the devices of the wedding guests were dormant or silent, a single cellular device was detected pinging inside Nancy's studio at 1:33 and 1:52 in the morning. Investigators wrote an additional search warrant to obtain the subscriber information for this specific device, which led them to a name: Carlo Fuentes Flores. Carlo Fuentes Flores was a local painter who had worked on Nancy's property in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. To his family, friends, and employers, Fuentes Flores was a polite, professional, and reliable worker. He was a dedicated father who had no criminal record in either the United States or Mexico. However, a forensic examination of his digital history revealed a starkly different aspect of his personality. Investigators discovered that Fuentes Flores had used his device to conduct frequent searches for specific adult content and escorts. They also found numerous self-recorded videos of him engaging in sexual encounters with various women, revealing a secret life that contrasted sharply with his public persona. To confirm their suspicions, detectives initiated surveillance on Fuentes. Flores. They followed him to a restaurant, where they successfully recovered a plastic beverage bottle he had discarded, the deoxyribonucleic acid extracted from the bottle was compared to the forensic evidence recovered from the bloody pillow in Nancy's bedroom, resulting in a perfect match. On November 18th, 2018, detectives brought Fuentes Flores to the sheriff's station for questioning. During the initial phase of the interrogation, Fuentes Flores maintained that he had no involvement in Nancy's disappearance, claiming he had only painted the exterior of the home and had barely interacted with her. Investigators slowly presented the evidence, letting him know that they had tracked his cellular device to the scene and possessed his deoxyribonucleic acid. As the pressure increased, Fuentes Flores's demeanor changed. He admitted that he had returned to the property on the night of the disappearance, but initially claimed that he had accidentally struck Nancy with his vehicle while retrieving a ladder and had taken her inside to help her. Under continued questioning, the implausibility of the accident story became apparent. Fuentes Flores ultimately confessed to the true sequence of events. He admitted that he had driven to Nancy's home with the intent to assault her, believing she had been flirting with him when she offered him food during his work. He entered the cottage, assaulted and raped her, and subsequently suffocated her with a pillow to prevent her from identifying him. In a crucial moment, Fuentes Flores offered to lead investigators to the location where he had hidden Nancy's remains. He directed detectives to a remote, arid area of the Carrizo Plain, nearly an hour's drive from the ranch. There, amidst the vast landscape, investigators discovered Nancy's remains, which had been left in the open and partially scattered by animal activity. Following his confession and the recovery of the victim, Fuentes Flores was arrested and charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances. While held in jail, his recorded phone conversations with his wife, Crystal, further confirmed his guilt as he apologized for his actions and expressed regret for the devastation he had caused. The defense team attempted to suppress the recorded confession, arguing that Fuentes Flores, a native Spanish speaker, had not fully understood his rights, despite having been read his Miranda warnings in English. The judge denied the motion, finding that Fuentes Flores spoke fluent English and had clearly understood the proceedings. In January of 2022, rather than proceeding with a lengthy jury trial, The case was resolved through a slow plea process. The prosecution presented its evidence to the judge, who found Fuentes Flores guilty of first-degree murder with the special circumstance of rape. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The resolution of these two cases highlights the profound impact of criminal behavior on families and communities, as well as the tireless dedication of the law enforcement professionals who investigate these tragedies. In both Summit County and Paso Robles, investigators refused to allow complex circumstances or deceptive facades to prevent them from uncovering the truth. Through the application of modern forensic techniques, such as advanced toxicology and geofencing, and through patient systematic analysis, the masks of Corey Richins and Carlo Fuentes Flores were stripped away, while the families of Eric Richins and Nancy Woodrum continue to carry the profound grief of their loss. The successful prosecution of those responsible ensures that justice has been served and the memory of their loved ones is preserved with dignity and respect. The anatomy of deception and the pursuit of justice. The human mind possesses an extraordinary capacity for adaptation, creativity, and resilience. However, in rare and tragic instances, that same capacity is subverted to construct elaborate facades designed to conceal the darkest of human impulses. To the outside world, a life can appear complete, harmonious, and admirable, while beneath the surface, a calculated sequence of events is unfolding. This study examines two deeply complex cases of tragedy and deception that occurred in quiet communities. Through the diligent efforts of law enforcement officers, forensic analysts, and determined family members, the elaborate masks worn by the perpetrators were systematically dismantled to reveal the truth. Both cases highlight a profound psychological contrast. On one hand, we observe the performative presentation of grief and innocence utilized as a shield against suspicion. On the other hand, we see the quiet, devastating reality of loss experienced by those left behind. By analyzing the psychological profiles, the financial and emotional motives, and the critical role of modern forensic technology, we can begin to understand how these crimes were conceptualized, executed, and ultimately solved. Part 1. The Mirage of Grief. In the scenic mountain towns of Summit County, Utah, the image of the perfect family is highly valued. The landscape is characterized by rolling hills, clean air, and close-knit communities where neighbors support one another. It was here that Corey Richins and her husband, Eric Richins, established their lives. 2. any casual observer, they were the embodiment of the American dream. Eric was a successful stonemason who had built a $1 million business named C&E Masonry. He was a dedicated father, a coach for his 3 young sons, and a respected member of his church. Corey was an ambitious real estate agent and property flipper who managed numerous renovation projects. Together with their 3 young boys, aged 10, 9, and 6, they lived in a beautiful home, took family vacations, and appeared destined for a long and prosperous future. However, on the morning of March 4th, year 2022, this picture of domestic bliss was shattered. At approximately 3 o'clock in the morning, Corey Richens made a frantic call to the emergency services. She reported that her husband was cold to the touch and not breathing. When emergency personnel arrived at the residence, they found Eric lying on his back. On the bedroom floor, there was no pulse, and his breathing had ceased. First, responders utilized an automated cardiopulmonary resuscitation machine, which produced a rhythmic, mechanical sound that echoed through the tense environment of the home. During the initial hours of the investigation, the scene was chaotic. Police, body-worn cameras captured Corey expressing shock and disbelief repeatedly, stating that her husband had been perfectly fine hours earlier. She explained to the responding deputies that they had been celebrating a significant financial milestone for her real estate business earlier that evening. According to her narrative, they shared a celebratory cocktail at approximately 9 o'clock in the evening. Afterward, she went to sleep in one of her children's bedrooms. Because the child was experiencing night terrors, she claimed that when she awoke and returned to her own bed, she found Eric unresponsive. When questioned about Eric's health, Corey and her mother, Lisa Darden, suggested various possibilities. They mentioned that Eric suffered from Lyme disease, which he had contracted during a hunting trip and received weekly allergy shots. They also noted that he looked pale and had complained of chest pain the previous evening. Corey mentioned that Eric occasionally consumed a tetrahydrocannabinol sleep gummy, though she was uncertain if he had taken one. That night, for a brief moment, the initial observations on the scene led some to hypothesize that Eric might have suffered a sudden medical emergency, such as an aneurysm. Paramedics noted an unusual amount of blood coming from his mouth during chest compressions, which initially supported this theory. However, because Eric was a young, active, and seemingly healthy 39-year-old man, the law requires a forensic autopsy to determine the exact cause of death. This routine legal requirement would mark the beginning of an investigation that would completely alter the public perception of Corey Richens. While the community mourned the loss of Eric, the tension between Corey and Eric's extended family began to escalate almost immediately. Eric was deeply connected to his sisters, Katie and Amy, and his father. His family had always harbored reservations about Corey, a sentiment that was exacerbated by a prenuptial agreement presented to Corey just before their wedding. The agreement protected Eric's interest in his masonry business, ensuring that Corey would only benefit from it in the event of his death while they were still married. 2 days after Eric's passing, the underlying animosity erupted into a physical altercation. Corey, eager to locate Eric's will, summoned a locksmith to open a safe in their home. Eric's sister, Amy, arrived at the residence and confronted Corey, asserting that she had no right to access the safe. It was during this confrontation that Amy revealed a devastating truth to Corey. Eric had secretly altered his estate planning documents in year 2020. He had established a trust, naming his sister Katie as the trustee and executor, and designating his 3 sons as the primary beneficiaries. The family home had also been placed into the trust, effectively leaving Corey with limited control over Eric's assets. The argument escalated to the point where law enforcement was called to the scene. Amy reported that Corey had assaulted her, resulting in Corey being arrested and subsequently pleading no contest to assault charges. This incident exposed a profound divide between the two families, which was glaringly obvious. At Eric's funeral, the attendees observed a distinct physical separation between Corey's supporters and Eric's family, with little communication or shared comfort. In the months that followed, Corey filed a civil lawsuit against Eric's sister, Katie, to dispute the validity of the trust. To the public, however, Corey began to cultivate a new persona. She presented herself as a grieving widow navigating the difficult path of raising 3 young, traumatized boys. She claimed that she had searched extensively for resources to help her children process their grief, but had found nothing suitable. This, she claimed, inspired her to write a children's book. The book, titled Are You With Me?, was self-published with the assistance of a ghostwriter. It was written from a perspective of a young boy wondering if his deceased father was still present in his life with the father's spirit, responding that he was indeed watching over them. Corey dedicated the book to her late husband, describing him as an amazing partner and father. In March of year 2023, Corey embarked on a media campaign appearing on local television and radio programs to promote the book and discuss the challenges of coping with sudden loss. Her appearances were met with public sympathy as viewers saw a young mother trying to find meaning in a terrible tragedy. Yet, behind the performative displays of maternal devotion and literary success, the criminal investigation was quietly progressing. The turning point came when the toxicology report from Eric's autopsy was completed. The results were startling. The cause of death was determined to be acute drug intoxication, specifically from fentanyl. The forensic testing revealed that Eric had ingested an amount of fentanyl that was 5 times the lethal dosage for an average human. Furthermore, the substance identified was illicitly manufactured fentanyl rather than medical-grade pharmaceutical fentanyl. This crucial detail eliminated the possibility of an accidental prescription overdose. Eric Richens had died from ingesting street-level narcotics, a finding that baffled those who knew him, as Eric had no history of illicit drug use. With the cause of death established as a poisoning, the Summit County Sheriff's Office launched a comprehensive homicide investigation. Detectives obtained search warrants for Corey's home, seizing electronic devices and searching for evidence of narcotics. Although no physical fentanyl was recovered from the residence during the initial searches, the digital forensics would prove to be invaluable. Investigators began to reconstruct Corey's financial situation, uncovering a reality that contrasted sharply with her public image of success. Far from being a prosperous real estate mogul, Corey was facing a catastrophic financial crisis. She was in debt for millions of dollars, largely due to her ambitious acquisition of a partially completed luxury mansion in Midway, Utah. She had purchased the property for nearly $3 million, planning to complete the construction, flip it, and sell it for a substantial profit. To finance this and 15 other renovation projects, Corey had relied on short-term, high-interest loans, commonly referred to as hard money loans. As her debts accumulated, Corey allegedly engaged in a series of fraudulent activities to keep her business afloat. Investigators discovered that in year 2020, Corey had forged Eric's signature to secure a $250,000 line of credit against their family home, which Eric owned. Solely, when Eric discovered this unauthorized loan, it caused a severe rift in their marriage. He consulted a divorce attorney and began the process of restructuring his estate to protect his children, which explained the secret trust that Corey discovered after his death. Although they pursued marriage, counseling, and remained together, the trust had been fundamentally broken. Corey's financial desperation also impacted her personal relationships. Her closest friend, Chelsea Barney, had entrusted Corey with $45,000 as a down payment for her first home, which Corey was supposed to help her purchase. Instead, Chelsea later discovered that the deed had never been properly recorded, and the property was ultimately foreclosed upon, leaving Chelsea and her family evicted and financially ruined. Another family, the Wrights, purchased a remodeled home from Corey, only to discover severe water damage and toxic mold that made their children ill and eventually led to foreclosure and financial distress. As investigators compiled the financial evidence, they also uncovered statements from Eric's friends and family regarding his past health crises. In year 2019, during a vacation to Greece, Eric became violently ill after consuming a drink because he was taking medication for Lyme disease that interacted poorly with alcohol. He had ordered a non-alcoholic beverage. After tasting the drink, he suspected it contained alcohol and immediately felt ill. He contacted his sister, expressing a fear that Corey was attempting to poison him. A more severe incident occurred on Valentine's Day of year 2022, just weeks before his death. Corey had purchased a bagel sandwich for Eric from a local establishment and left it for him with a romantic note. After taking a single bite of the sandwich, Eric suffered a severe reaction. He was forced to use his son's epinephrine pen and consume Benadryl before falling into a deep sleep. He later texted a friend, stating that he believed his wife had attempted to poison him and that he had narrowly escaped death. The breakthrough in the homicide investigation came when detectives analyzed Corey's communication records. A private investigator hired by Eric's family had analyzed thousands of text messages and identified a consistent pattern of communication between Corey and an individual named Carmen Lauber. Carmen was a housekeeper who also worked on Corey's renovation properties. Crucially, Carmen had a history of drug-related offenses. Under the direction of a new lead investigator, Detective Jeff O'Driscoll, law enforcement focused their attention on Carmen. After a search of Carmen's, residents revealed drug paraphernalia and an unlicensed firearm. She was faced with significant criminal charges. In exchange for leniency, Carmen agreed to cooperate with the prosecution. She revealed to detectives that Corey had approached her on 2 separate occasions in early year 2022, requesting that she procure strong prescription pain medication for an investor. Carmen admitted that she had obtained fentanyl pills from a local dealer named Robert Crozier and delivered them to Corey. According to Carmen, Corey had requested a second, stronger batch after the first delivery, claiming that the initial pills were not potent enough. The timing of these transactions was highly incriminating. Phone records showed an exchange of 30 text messages between Corey and Carmen on Valentine's Day. The day Eric was poisoned by the sandwich, and another series of communications. On February 26th, just days before Eric's fatal overdose. On May 8th, year 2023, Corey Richens was arrested and charged with aggravated murder and multiple counts of possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community and captured national media attention. The contrast between her public persona as a grieving mother promoting a book on childhood grief and the allegations of calculated murder was deeply disturbing. While Corey was held in custody, the prosecution's case grew stronger. During a routine search of her jail cell, deputies discovered a handwritten 4-page document that would become known as the Walk the Dog letter. The document, written by Corey, was addressed to her mother and contained instructions for her brother, Ronnie. In the letter, Corey outlined a detailed narrative that she wanted Ronnie to present to the court. The story suggested that Eric had obtained pain pills and fentanyl from workers at a ranch in Mexico, attempting to establish an alternative explanation for the source of the drugs. The prosecution argued that this was clear evidence of witness tampering and consciousness of guilt. Corey's defense team countered that the letter was merely a draft of a fictional manuscript she was writing, but the explanation did not convince the authorities. In March of year 2024, the state amended the charges to include attempted murder, specifically relating to the Valentine's Day poisoning. Additionally, investigators uncovered a potential second motive. Beyond financial gain, an extramarital affair. Digital forensics revealed that Corey had been engaged in a long-term relationship with a handyman named Josh Grossman. The two had exchanged daily text messages expressing deep affection and discussing a future together. In the weeks leading up to Eric's death, Corey had texted Josh about her dream of divorcing Eric, securing millions of dollars, and living with Josh on the Midway property. In one particularly significant message sent less than 48 hours before Eric's death, Corey urged Josh to remain patient until Friday, promising that her life would soon change. The defense underwent a significant transition when Corey's initial attorney, Sky Lozero, withdrew due to a conflict of interest. She was replaced by public defenders Kathy Nestor and Wendy Lewis, experienced trial attorneys who prepared to challenge the state's circumstantial evidence. Corey released an audio recording from jail, maintaining her innocence and asserting that she had always protected her husband and would never harm him. The trial of Corey Richens began in a small courthouse near Park City, Utah. The jury consisted of 8 members, 6 men and 2 women. The prosecution, led by Brad Bloodworth, presented a powerful case detailing Corey's staggering debts, which exceeded $4,500,000, her desire to escape, her marriage, and the testimony of individuals who facilitated the acquisition of the fentanyl. The state's witnesses included Eric's sister, Katie, who delivered emotional testimony regarding the devastating loss of her brother. Carmen Lauber also took the stand, detailing her role in procuring the narcotics and expressing remorse for her actions, although the defense attempted to discredit Carmen by highlighting her criminal history and the plea deal she received. Her testimony provided a direct link between Corey and the lethal substance. Perhaps the most dramatic moment of the trial occurred when Josh Grossman, Corey's former lover, was called to testify, visible distressed and emotional. Grossman confirmed the nature of their relationship and the text messages they had exchanged. He recounted a conversation he had with Corey after Eric's death, during which she asked him if he had ever killed anyone during his military service in Iraq and how it had made him feel. In a surprising turn of events, when the prosecution rested its case after 13 days of testimony, the defense team chose to rest immediately without calling any witnesses. They argued that the state had failed to meet the burden of proof, pointing out that there was no direct forensic evidence showing how the fentanyl had been introduced into Eric's system on the night of his death. Corey waived her right to testify, and the case was handed to the jury. After deliberating for less than 3 hours, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict. Corey Richins was found guilty of aggravated murder, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. The swift verdict brought a sense of relief and justice to Eric's family, who embraced outside the courtroom. The consequences of Corey's actions extended far beyond her own incarceration. Her parental rights were terminated, and her 3 sons were adopted by one of Eric's sisters, ensuring they would be raised in a stable and loving environment, far removed from the deception that had claimed their father's life. Eric Richins would be remembered not for the tragedy of his death, but for the love he showed to his children and the laughter he shared with his friends. Part 2, The Shadow in Paradise. While the drama in Utah unfolded in the public eye, another profound mystery was investigated in the coastal hills of Paso Robles, California. Paso Robles is an area of exceptional natural beauty characterized by vast vineyards, ancient oak, trees, and a peaceful agricultural lifestyle. It was here that 62-year-old Nancy Woodrum chose to live. Nancy was a cherished member of the community, known for her warmth, generosity, and her successful career as a hairstylist at her salon, The Strand. Nancy had experienced significant personal tragedies in her life. She had lost an infant son, a teenage daughter who suffered from cystic fibrosis, and her husband, Robert, who died suddenly of a heart attack. Throughout these trials, Nancy maintained a deep faith as a Jehovah's Witness, holding onto the belief that the earth would eventually be restored to a peaceful paradise. In year 2006, Nancy and her late husband had purchased a rural property on Faro Road, which they lovingly renovated. They named it Paradise Ranch, and Nancy eventually converted the main house into a vacation rental while she resided in a small, adjacent cottage on the property. On the weekend of May 4th, year 2018, a wedding party checked into the main house at Paradise Ranch. The atmosphere was festive, with the bride and her guests preparing for a celebration at a local winery. Nancy welcomed them warmly, introducing herself and offering her assistance before retiring to her cottage. The following day, May 5th, Nancy's daughter, Amanda, became concerned when her mother failed to appear for a scheduled Bible study. Such behavior was entirely uncharacteristic of Nancy. Amanda requested that a neighbor check on her mother's residence. The neighbor discovered that the front door of the cottage was wide open, the television was playing loudly, and there was no sign of Nancy. When Amanda arrived at the property, she entered a scene that immediately filled her with dread. The interior of the cottage appeared normal at first glance, but a closer inspection revealed ominous signs. There were 2 large bloodstains on the carpet. Nancy's bedding and sheets were missing, and there was blood spatter on the headboard, a cabinet, and a pillow. Strangely, Nancy's purse, keys, cellular phone, and tablet were all left behind, and her vehicles remained parked outside. Amanda immediately contacted emergency services. Responding deputies, including Senior Deputy Clinton Cole, recognized the gravity of the situation. The presence of blood spatter and the missing bedding indicated that Nancy had been assaulted and taken from her home against her will. The tranquil vacation rental had transformed into an active crime scene, complete with search dogs, helicopters, and forensic technicians. The investigation faced an immediate challenge. There were more than 20 wedding guests staying on the property, creating a substantial pool of potential suspects who had immediate access to the area. Furthermore, the property's remote location meant that any unusual activity would likely go unnoticed by neighbors. A significant discovery was made on the evening of Nancy's disappearance. An officer with the California Highway Patrol located several items of bedding and clothing scattered along La Ponza Road, approximately 6 miles from Paradise Ranch. The items included a bloody pillow, a dress, a pair of shorts, and a gingham print sheet that matched the remaining bedding in Nancy's cottage.